She said it could ruin her. I said it could save us both. The office was quiet, almost oppressively so, with only the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Papers were scattered across my desk, the remnants of a long day of reports, meetings, and deadlines. The city outside had already slipped into night, lights twinkling like distant stars. I stayed behind longer than usual, partly to finish work, partly because I felt a strange pull toward her, my boss, a woman whose presence carried both authority and warmth. She appeared at the doorway, hesitating for a moment before stepping inside. Her posture, usually upright and commanding, seemed tense, almost fragile. The soft click of her heels on the carpeted floor was the only sound until she finally spoke, her voice unusually low, almost a whisper. "This could ruin me." The words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't speaking about the spreadsheets or the quarterly report, I knew it immediately. It was something deeper, something personal, vulnerable. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles paling under the pressure, betraying the conflict she tried to hide behind her usual composed exterior. I felt my heart quicken, a mix of concern and a strange, undeniable curiosity. She didn't meet my eyes at first, staring down at the scattered papers as if the right answer or confession could be found in the numbers. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that was both frightening and exhilarating. I took a careful step closer, careful not to invade the fragile bubble of space she had around herself. The faint scent of her perfume drifted toward me, soft, floral, and lingering, blending with the faint metallic tang of ink and paper in the room. My hand itched to reach out, but I hesitated, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of her words settle between us. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady but soft, "Or save us both." The pause that followed was almost unbearable. She lifted her gaze slowly, eyes wide for just a fraction of a second, then narrowing as if scrutinizing not just my words but my intentions, my very soul. For a moment, nothing else existed, just the two of us, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room, and the quiet understanding that something significant was unfolding. No one had to say more. The words, the silence, the subtle shift in her posture, her brief exhale, the almost imperceptible relaxation of her shoulders, spoke volumes. It was the beginning of something dangerous, exhilarating, and utterly unavoidable. Something that neither of us could turn away from, even if we wanted to. After she left the office that night, I felt an almost magnetic pull to follow her. Not in a literal sense, she didn't notice, but the lingering tension between us made it impossible to leave the space of her presence behind. A few minutes later, she appeared again, as if sensing my hesitation, and suggested quietly, "Let's take a walk. I need some air." The streets outside were calm, almost deserted. The city's usual noise had softened into the distant hum of traffic and the occasional flutter of leaves in the gentle night breeze. Streetlights lined the sidewalks, their warm glow casting long, uneven shadows that danced at our feet. We walked side by side, the silence between us weighted but comfortable, charged with unspoken words. Every so often, our shoulders brushed, an almost imperceptible contact that made my chest tighten in ways I hadn't anticipated. Her presence was calming yet electrifying, a contradiction I couldn't reconcile. I noticed the subtle grace in her movements, the way her coat swayed as she walked, the careful way she adjusted her scarf, and the faint tension in her fingers as she twisted the edge of it. She finally broke the silence, her voice low and hesitant. I don't know if I should be doing this." There was a vulnerability in her tone that I had never heard before, and it pulled at something deep inside me. She paused, her gaze dropping to the pavement. People would talk. They would never understand. I slowed my pace, matching hers, and let my hand brush lightly against hers, not quite touching, but close enough that the warmth of proximity made my pulse quicken. "Maybe they don't have to understand," I said softly. "Maybe it's enough that we do." She glanced at me then, eyes flickering with something like relief mixed with fear. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though the flicker of doubt remained. The night air carried her perfume, soft and lingering, mingling with the crisp coolness of the evening. I realized then how much I wanted to protect her, not just from others' opinions, but from her own self-doubt. We walked on, talking quietly in fragments, about work, about life, about things we never allowed ourselves to say during office hours. Every shared laugh, every subtle brush of our arms against one another, sent tiny shocks through me, a mix of longing and hesitation. There was no rush, no expectation, just the slow, steady building of trust and intimacy. By the time we reached the small park at the end of the street, the tension had shifted. It was no longer fear alone, there was curiosity, closeness, and a silent acknowledgement that something unspoken was growing between us. For the first time, I felt like we were walking not just through the city, but into a new, uncertain, and exhilarating chapter. The park was quiet, almost intimate in its stillness, with only the occasional rustle of leaves and distant hum of traffic breaking the calm. We found a small bench tucked beneath an old oak tree, its branches casting delicate shadows over us. She sat first, folding her hands neatly on her lap, her posture taut but hesitant, like she was bracing herself for something she wasn't sure she wanted. I hesitated before sitting beside her, leaving a respectful distance between us. The space felt charged, as though every inch carried meaning. The night air was cool, brushing against my skin, and I noticed how her coat clung slightly to her shoulders, how a loose strand of hair had escaped her scarf. I wanted to reach out, to fix it for her, but the fear of crossing an invisible line held me back. After a few moments of silence, I did something small, a gesture that felt monumental in its intimacy. I placed my hand lightly over hers, palm meeting palm. She stiffened for an instant, and my heart lurched at the sudden tension. But then, slowly, her fingers trembled and curled slightly, accepting the contact. It was an electric kind of stillness, the kind that made the world narrow down to just the warmth of our hands, the rhythm of our breathing, and the quiet, unspoken understanding between us. I could feel her pulse beneath her skin, a subtle, steady thrum that somehow resonated with my own. The touch was fleeting yet heavy with meaning, a silent conversation that neither words nor apologies could capture. Her eyes met mine briefly, wide and searching, then lowered again as if afraid to hold the gaze for too long. There was no rush, no pressure, only the delicate tension of closeness and the fragile permission that had been granted in that simple touch. We spoke little after that, letting the silence do the work of connection. I noticed the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders as she exhaled, the way her hand felt lighter in mine when she adjusted her fingers unconsciously. Every subtle movement, every quiet sigh, spoke volumes. I realized then how rare and precious these moments were, moments of vulnerability, trust, and intimacy that carried more weight than 1,000 spoken confessions. For both of us, the risk of emotion was palpable, but so was the comfort in shared presence. As we sat there, side by side, hands nearly touching, the night seemed to hold its breath with us. In that gentle, suspended space, I understood that intimacy was not just about words or declarations, it was about trust, touch, and the willingness to let someone see the parts of us we usually keep hidden. And for the first time, it felt like she was letting me see her, not the boss, not the polished exterior, but the woman beneath, quietly trembling yet slowly leaning into the possibility of connection. The park bench felt like a small island in the quiet of the night, removed from the city's relentless pace. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, and I noticed how her coat clung to her in the soft wind, how her scarf shifted slightly when she turned her head to look at me. There was something tender about this space, safe enough for words she wouldn't say in the office, intimate enough to lower her guard. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing a fraction, and for the first time that night, she spoke without hesitation. "I'm afraid," she admitted softly. Her voice trembled just slightly, fragile against the hush of the park. "Afraid of what people would think, of losing control, of being seen as weak." The honesty in her words struck me. I had seen her composed, confident, almost untouchable in the office, but now she was real, human, vulnerable, raw. I reached out instinctively, resting my hand near hers on the bench without quite touching, letting her know I was present, that I could bear witness to this moment without judgment. She looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap, the subtle quiver in her fingers betraying her inner turmoil. "I'm used to being strong," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I feel like I can't even breathe under it." I wanted to say something to ease her burden, to make her feel lighter, but words felt inadequate. So instead, I leaned slightly closer, lowering my tone, letting my voice become steady and calm. "You don't always have to be strong with me," I said, soft enough for only her to hear. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Her breath caught subtly, and I felt the shift in her posture, the way her chest rose and fell with a little more ease. Her gaze flicked up to mine, and for a heartbeat, it was as though the walls she had built around herself softened, the careful polish of authority giving way to something more real, more intimate. The night air seemed warmer now, or maybe it was the closeness, the tension turning into a quiet intimacy. Her lips curved in the slightest, almost imperceptible smile, and her eyes glistened, reflecting the soft glow of a distant streetlight. It was not a smile of amusement, but one of relief, trust, and tentative hope. In that moment, I understood the depth of what was unfolding between us. It was no longer about fleeting attraction or curiosity. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to show oneself fully, to reveal the cracks and the doubts, and still be accepted. The park, the bench, the night, they all faded around us. All that remained was the fragile, electric bond of two people slowly letting each other in, discovering that vulnerability could be the beginning of something profoundly human, and perhaps, something beautiful. The city streets were quieter now, the night pressing in with a velvet hush. Streetlights cast soft pools of golden light, illuminating the sidewalk in a way that made everything feel intimate and private, though we were still surrounded by the distant hum of late-night traffic. We walked together, shoulders occasionally brushing, each accidental contact sending tiny jolts of awareness through me. When we reached her car, parked under a solitary lamp at the edge of the lot, she stopped. She opened the driver's door but didn't step inside. Instead, she lingered, the glow of the streetlight highlighting the curve of her cheek and the subtle shimmer in her eyes. There was something almost magnetic in the way she looked at me, expectant yet cautious, vulnerable yet commanding in its quiet intensity. I stepped closer, aware of every fraction of space between us. The air was crisp against my skin, carrying the faint scent of her perfume, soft and lingering, mingling with the earthy night around us. My pulse throbbed with a mixture of anticipation and hesitation. I wanted to close the distance completely, yet I was painfully aware of the boundaries we hadn't yet crossed. Without thinking, my hand moved almost on its own, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. The motion was light, tentative, reverent even, and I felt her inhale sharply, just enough to let me know she noticed. Her eyes flickered briefly, a mixture of desire and restraint, before dropping to the pavement. For a suspended heartbeat, it felt as if time itself had slowed. Every noise faded, the distant traffic, the rustling leaves, even the hum of the city seemed to dissolve, leaving only the tension between us. I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, the gentle rise and fall of her chest under her coat, the subtle quiver in her fingers as they brushed against mine. I leaned just a fraction closer, enough to feel the faint brush of her breath against my cheek, and for a moment, it seemed inevitable that we would close the final distance. Her eyes met mine, wide, searching, and I saw in them the same mix of fear and longing that roiled inside me. Then, just as the space between us seemed ready to vanish, she pulled back slightly. A whisper of a smile touched her lips, and she murmured, "Not yet." The single word carried both restraint and promise, a quiet acknowledgement of the tension we could not yet release but would not ignore. I stepped back just enough to respect her choice, though every fiber of me ached to linger closer. In that instant, the near kiss became more than a moment of desire, it became a shared understanding, a silent vow that when the time came, we would cross this boundary together, intentionally, and with care. The car, the streetlight, the night, they all became part of a suspended world where anticipation was sweeter than fulfillment, and restraint deepened the bond between us. The days that followed felt suspended in a quiet, almost unbearable tension. Every glance across the office, every accidental brush of hands as we passed in the hallway, carried weight. The near kiss lingered in my mind like a vivid photograph, etched with every detail, the warmth of her skin, the faint tremble of her fingers, the restrained longing in her eyes. I sensed she felt it too. Her composed exterior occasionally faltered in small, fleeting moments, revealing the vulnerability she usually hid so well. One evening, after everyone else had left, she asked me to stay behind again. Her voice was calm but held an undercurrent of something unspoken, a mix of hesitation and decision. I followed her into the quiet office, aware of the shift in atmosphere. The room felt different now, less formal, warmer somehow, the harsh fluorescent lights softened by the fading evening glow. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she moved closer, just a step, her eyes meeting mine with that same intensity that had haunted me for days. Then, without preamble, she reached for my hand. This time, there was no flinch, no hesitation, just the steady, deliberate grip of someone choosing to trust. Her fingers interlaced with mine, firm yet gentle, and I felt the quiet power in that simple gesture. "Maybe this won't ruin me," she whispered, her voice low and measured, "maybe it will remind me I'm alive." There was a raw honesty in her words, a surrender to possibility. I could see the courage it took for her to say it, to allow herself to feel rather than control, to acknowledge desire without fear. I responded not with words, but with presence. I leaned slightly closer, letting the warmth of my body bridge the space between us, letting the pressure of my hand communicate the support and care that words could never fully capture. I noticed the subtle sigh that escaped her lips, the way her shoulders loosened as the tension melted slightly. The office, once a place of rigid formality, had transformed into a haven of intimacy. There was no rush, no expectation, only the mutual understanding that we were taking a deliberate step forward, toward closeness, toward trust, toward something deeper than mere attraction. That night, the turning point wasn't marked by grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was in the quiet certainty of holding her hand, of standing close, of choosing each other despite the risk. For the first time, I felt the emotional walls between us crumble, replaced by something warm, steady, and undeniably alive. We didn't need to speak, the silence said everything. The tension that had haunted us became the bond that would carry us forward, stronger for the patience, restraint, and courage it had demanded. The office felt different that night, quieter, warmer, somehow more intimate. The city lights outside the window spilled across the polished floor in soft streaks, casting a golden glow that seemed to soften the edges of reality. We were alone, the world outside reduced to a distant hum. Every sound, the faint rustle of papers, the click of her heels as she moved closer, the gentle sigh of the air conditioner, felt amplified in the hush between us. She approached slowly, her movements deliberate yet unhurried, as though measuring the distance between us with care. I could see the subtle tension in her shoulders, the careful way she adjusted her scarf, and the slight tremor in her hands that betrayed both nerves and anticipation. Every detail made my chest tighten with a mix of awe, admiration, and longing. Without a word, she reached out, her arms sliding around my waist. The motion was gentle, tentative at first, then firmer as if anchoring herself in the safety of the connection we had built. Her cheek rested lightly against my chest, and I felt the steady, reassuring beat of her heart, a rhythm that somehow seemed to synchronize with my own. The moment stretched, suspended in the quiet intimacy of the office. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders, leaning slightly so that my chin brushed the top of her hair. The warmth of her body, the softness of her hair against my cheek, the faint scent of her perfume, it all combined into an almost overwhelming sense of closeness and belonging. We didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. The history of glances, touches, and shared silences had created a language of its own, one that expressed trust, longing, and the quiet joy of being fully seen. Every hesitation, every near kiss, every whispered admission of fear had led to this moment, a resolution born not of dramatic gestures, but of patient understanding. I could feel the relief in her embrace, the way she leaned into me, letting go of the tension that had gripped her for so long. There was a softness in her posture now, a surrender not of weakness, but of choice. She had chosen to trust, to lean into the uncertainty, and in doing so, had created a space where we could exist simply as ourselves, together. The night outside continued its quiet rhythm, but within the office, time seemed to pause. The connection we had nurtured, built with care, restraint, and honest vulnerability, was no longer tentative, it was steady, warm, and undeniable. In her arms, I felt the culmination of every stolen glance, every hesitant touch, every unspoken word. We didn't need more than this embrace. For the first time, neither of us was afraid. There was only the quiet, perfect certainty of having found each other in a world that might not understand, but that didn't matter anymore. In that embrace, the slow burn finally blossomed into something real, something lasting, something entirely ours. If you felt the tension, the longing, and the quiet moments between them, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more slow burn romances. Comment below, which moment between them left your heart racing the most. And turn on notifications so you never miss a story that makes love feel real, tender, and unforgettable.